Hey everyone, it is Monday, May the 4th, and that is Star Wars Day, everyone, so may the 4th be with you. Today we are starting a new unit, and it's basically the last unit. It is going to be a review of some key skills and concepts that I want to make sure you go away with as you go into your summer work for AP Language and get ready for that class. So, that's the plan. You're going to be reading and doing some assignments from a book that I have called Pre-AP Reading and Exercises. It's exciting, I know. But the book has lots of good stuff in it that maybe you can use for, like I said, your summer work and going forward into AP Language. So, this week's this week's lesson is going to be about some really basic stuff, just going back over it. The big idea for this week then is to remember the basic things you need to know to properly analyze a text. And we can divide those things up into two categories. One, understanding what the text means, and then two, understanding how the author conveyed that meaning. So let's start with number one. If you don't understand what the text means, then you're dead in the water. You can't do anything, right? So let's talk about that. When making meaning out of a text, it's important to note, and this is in the reading that I'm going to have you do this week, it's important to note that we're talking about what it means in terms of what the author intends it to mean. Not necessarily your personal reaction to it, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, but just what was the author trying to communicate. That's the meaning that we're trying to get at when we do this kinds of analysis. So the very most basic first step then in that process is making sure you know what the words mean, the individual words, and not just what they mean in general, kinda, but specifically in a detailed way, understanding exactly what each word means in its most particular sense. And that's what we're all about this week, is practicing that. So that's why we do those vocabulary words, and it's why we talk about diction a lot, because understanding those individual word choices is really important. This week, we're talking simply about denotation, not connotation. We'll talk about that next week. Denotation is the literal dictionary definition of a word. But of course, as you know, if you've ever looked in a dictionary, there are multiple meanings of most words, especially the more advanced words. And so figuring out which of those multiple meanings an author is using, or whether or not the author is trying to play multiple meanings of an individual word off of each other, those are important things to note. So, denotation then. It's not good enough to guess or estimate about key words and what their meanings are in a text. You probably remember from younger grades when you were encouraged to figure out the meaning of a word based on context clues, right? That was like a big buzzword in elementary school, right? Context clues. Figure out what it means by all the other things around it that you do know. And that's cool if you're just trying to get an estimation of the meaning, or if you're trying to just, leisurely or recreationally read something. That's cool. And in fact, oftentimes you don't have any resources with you to look a word up, and so you have to rely on those context clues. They're good skills. But when you're doing an analysis of a text, that's not good enough. Like, you have to be exact. And so to say, like, well, I think kind of like the basic meaning of this sentence is this, you miss all of the important things. So this week I want you to focus on not allowing that fuzzy kind of meaning to creep into your understanding of sentences. So using context clues is right out this week. Don't even think about doing that. If there's a word you're not certain about, you look it up. Okay. Finally, to the same point, I want to point out that when we look at a word's meanings, it's the subtle differences between what a word might mean and what the word really means that can have big ramifications for the overall meaning of the text. And the reading in the chapter that you're going to be doing this week makes a really big point of that, and it gives you a really good example of that. And I actually want to read that example to you. So you might have already read this, or you might be preparing to read this, but in the PDF document that you have on Google Classroom that you're going to read, the textbook offers this line from O. Henry's story, The Gift of the Magi. And you're going to read that whole story eventually. But this line from that story has some key words in it that you might not know. So here it is. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. Now there's words in there that you're going to have to look up, right? And as you look them up, the meaning of that sentence will become more clear. But if we didn't look them up, you could probably make an educated guess, like, oh, this person it's describing is embarrassed because it says her cheeks burned when this happened. And so we get this image of the red cheeks, right? She's embarrassed, or maybe infuriated. But why is she embarrassed? With the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. And what ends up happening, most students will read that, and based on the context clues, they think, this person is embarrassed because she's poor. And if that was the context clue conclusion that you drew, you would be so wrong. And that's the point here. If you break those words down and look them up, you'll find that what she's embarrassed about is not that this person thinks she's poor, but that this person thinks she's being stingy, that she has money, but she won't spend it, which is a very different thing from being poor, right? And it matters for the meaning of the story. So those are the kinds of subtle differences in word meaning that you have to be able to identify. And that's what this week's exercises are all about. So you're going to read the textbook, and then you're going to read the story, The Gift of the Magi. And I want you to pay really close attention to specific words. It's an old story, so there's a bunch of words in there you don't know. Look them up. And then, after you've read it, I have 5 multiple choice questions on a Google form. And I want to see if you can answer those based on really specific word meanings. When you answer each question, you should get a little pop-up that gives you feedback about what the right answer is and what the wrong answers are and why. So please do read those, because I typed those in so that you would see and maybe learn from the actual process of answering correctly or incorrectly. And that's all of the work for today, just to read that. And it's a short story. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. And read the page and a half before that as well. That's kind of an introduction and is kind of about the same things that I'm talking about now. And that's it for today. Tomorrow I will post a video that goes into more detail about the story itself. And you'll be reading a student essay analyzing that story. And we'll talk a little bit about whether or not it's good and why. All right. Well, have a great Star Wars day. And I'll see you, well, probably not, because not very many people are showing up to office hours. But I will make more videos for you tomorrow. All right. Later.